The late winter wind howled through the San Juan Mountains like a wounded beast, scraping across the rocky slopes and whistling through the pines. Snow still clung to the higher elevations. But down in the valley where Bo Hartley's ranch sat, the thaw had begun its messy work. The ground had turned to a treacherous mix of mud and slush that sucked at boots and wagon wheels alike, making every step a calculated effort. Bo stood on his porch, watching the gray dawn break over the mountains. His weathered hands gripped a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He'd been up since 3, tending to a sick calf, and now faced another day of trying to hold everything together. The ranch house behind him was too quiet, had been for 4 months now, ever since Mary had succumbed to the lung fever that swept through the valley last winter. "Papa," a small voice called from inside. "Lucy won't stop coughing again." Bo sighed and turned back into the house. His eldest, Samuel, stood in the doorway of the children's room, his 9-year-old face creased with worry that no child should wear. Behind him, Bo could hear the rasping cough of 5-year-old Lucy, punctuated by the whimpers of 3-year-old Thomas. "I'm coming, son," Bo said, setting down his cup. The floorboards creaked under his boots as he made his way to the children's room. Lucy lay curled in her bed, her small body shaking with each cough. Her blonde hair, so like her mother's, was matted with sweat. "It's all right, little bird," Bo murmured, lifting her into his arms. She felt too light, like a bundle of twigs wrapped in a nightgown. "Let's get you some warm honey water." In the kitchen, Bo fumbled with the stove. Mary had always managed it so effortlessly, keeping the fire just right, always having something warm and nourishing ready. His attempts at cooking usually resulted in burned beans or undercooked meat. The children ate without complaint, but he'd noticed how thin they'd all gotten over the winter. "I can help, Papa," Samuel offered, already reaching for the water bucket. "You're a good boy, Sam," Bo said, his voice rough. "But you shouldn't have to—" He stopped himself. The boy was already doing more than any 9-year-old should, after getting Lucy settled with her honey water and a cool cloth for her forehead. Bo checked on the livestock. The cattle were gaunt, their winter coats hanging loose on their frames. The horses weren't much better. He'd had to sell 2 good mares last month just to buy feed and medicine. At this rate, he'd have nothing left to sell come spring market. The sun was high by the time Bo hitched up the wagon for the trip to Mercy's Bend. He needed supplies, flour, salt, maybe some canned goods if he could afford them. More importantly, he needed to find help. Mrs. Patterson from the neighboring ranch had been coming by twice a week, but her own family needed her now that her daughter was expecting. "Can we come, Papa?" Thomas asked, his round face hopeful. "Not today, little man. You stay here with Sam and Lucy. I'll bring back something special if you're good." The road to town was a brutal 8 miles of rutted tracks and mud holes. The wagon lurched and groaned, threatening to throw an axle at every turn. Bo's shoulders ached from fighting the reins, keeping the horses steady through the worst of it. Mercy's Bend wasn't much to look at. A collection of weather-beaten buildings huddled along a single muddy street. The general store, the saloon, a small hotel, the church, and a handful of other establishments that served the scattered ranches and mining camps in the area. But it was civilization, such as it was, and Bo's only source for supplies. He tied up the horses outside Morrison's general store and scraped the worst of the mud from his boots. Inside, the familiar scent of coffee, leather, and pickle brine greeted him. Tom Morrison looked up from his ledger, his expression sympathetic. "Bo, how are the children?" "Managing," Bo replied curtly. He wasn't one for sharing his troubles, even with those who meant well. "Need the usual, and—" He hesitated. "You know anyone looking for work? Housekeeping, cooking, such like?" Morrison shook his head slowly. "Times are hard. Bo, most folks are barely keeping their own heads above water. You might try asking at the hotel, but I wouldn't hold much hope." Bo nodded and set about gathering his supplies. The prices seemed to have gone up again. He calculated carefully, putting back the canned peaches he'd hoped to surprise the children with. Maybe next time. As he loaded his purchases into the wagon, a commotion near the grain warehouse caught his attention. Sheriff Watson was there, along with Dan Fletcher, who ran the hotel, and they seemed to be hassling someone sitting against the warehouse wall. "I said move along," Fletcher was saying. "We don't need any more beggars in this town. Bad for business. Please." A woman's voice answered, thin and desperate. "I'm not begging. I'm looking for work. I'll do anything. Cooking, cleaning, washing. I just need—" "What you need is to get on the next stage out of here," Watson interrupted. "We've got enough problems without taking in every stray that wanders through." Bo found himself walking closer. The woman came into view, thin to the point of gauntness. Her dress patched and travel-worn, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that only emphasized the hollow shadows under her eyes. She was perhaps 30, maybe younger. Hardship had a way of aging people out here. "I can work," she insisted, struggling to her feet. Her hands shook slightly, whether from cold or hunger. Bo couldn't tell. "I'm a good cook. I can mend, do laundry. Please, I just need a chance." "Clara May, isn't it?" Fletcher said with a sneer. "Yeah, I heard about you. That widow woman from Denver way. The one who can't—" He made a crude gesture. "No wonder your late husband's family threw you out. What use is a woman who can't give a man children?" The woman, Clara, flinched as if struck, but lifted her chin. "I can work. That's all I'm asking for." "Not in my hotel. You won't," Fletcher said. "Bad enough you couldn't pay for your room. I don't need barren women bringing bad luck to my establishment." Something in the woman's dignified desperation stirred something in Bo. Maybe it was the way she held herself despite the humiliation. Or maybe it was just the practical thought of his children coughing in their beds with no one to tend them properly. "Ma'am," he heard himself saying. All three turned to look at him. "You say you can cook?" Clara's eyes, brown and weary, met his. "Yes, sir, I can cook, clean, tend to household matters. I've kept house all my life." "Can you handle children?" A flicker of pain crossed her features, quickly suppressed. "Yes, sir, I've tended to my sister's children many times." Bo looked at Watson and Fletcher. "She bothering anyone besides you two?" Watson had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Now, Bo, we're just trying to keep the peace. Seems peaceful enough to me," Bo said. He turned back to Clara. "I've got 3 children need tending. Ranch work, room, board, and wages. $1 a week if the work's satisfactory." Clara's eyes widened. "Sir, You interested or not? I haven't got all day." "Yes," she said quickly. "Yes, sir. I'm interested." "Then get your things." She bent to pick up a small carpet bag, apparently all she owned in the world. Fletcher stepped forward. "Now wait a minute. Bo, you don't know anything about this woman. And what will people say? You taking in a strange female with your wife barely cold?" "My wife is 4 months buried," Bo said quietly, and something in his tone made Fletcher step back. "My children need care. This woman needs work. Seems a simple enough arrangement to me." He turned and walked back to his wagon, not looking to see if Clara followed. But he heard her quick steps in the mud, heard her breath catch as she hefted her bag. "Sir, Mr. Hartley, Bo Hartley, you need help up?" She was already climbing onto the wagon seat, moving with a determined efficiency despite her obvious exhaustion. "No, sir, and I'm Clara May Thompson. Well, Mrs. Thompson. Hope you meant what you said about hard work. It's 8 miles to the ranch, and the road's rough." "I've traveled rougher," she said quietly. Bo clicked to the horses and the wagon lurched forward. As they pulled away from town, he caught a glimpse of Watson and Fletcher still standing there, shaking their heads. Let them talk. They didn't have 3 children slowly starving, slowly getting sicker with no one to properly tend them. The woman beside him sat rigid, hands folded tightly in her lap. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just stared ahead at the muddy road unwinding before them. Bo found himself oddly grateful for the silence. He'd made his decision on impulse, driven by desperation, and now the reality of it was setting in. He was bringing a complete stranger into his home, around his children. But what choice did he have? He thought of Lucy's cough, of Samuel trying to cook breakfast, of little Thomas asking when Mama was coming back. No choice at all, really. The mountains loomed around them, still touched with snow at their peaks, but showing patches of brown earth lower down. Spring was coming, slowly but surely. Maybe, Bo thought as the wagon wheels found their familiar ruts toward home. Maybe this was part of that renewal. Not a replacement for Mary, never that, but perhaps a necessary help in keeping her children alive and cared for. "It's a hard life out here," he said finally, not looking at the woman beside him. "I'm acquainted with hard lives. Mr. Hartley." Clara replied, and something in her tone suggested she spoke the truth. The ranch came into view as they crested the last hill, the log house with its stone chimney, the barn and outbuildings, the corrals where two thin cattle stood in the mud. It wasn't much, but it was all Bo had built with his own hands, with Mary by his side. Now he would have to trust it, and his children, to this stranger whose desperation matched his own. "Welcome to the Double H," he said, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "Hope you're ready to work, Mrs. Thompson." Clara looked at the house, and Bo saw something in her face that might have been relief or might have been resignation. "I'm ready, Mr. Hartley. You won't regret this." As she climbed down from the wagon, gathering her thin skirts against the mud, Bo hoped she was right. For all their sakes, he hoped she was right. The wagon wheels squelched through the mud as they made their way back along the rutted road. Clara May Thompson sat rigid beside Bo, her thin hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles showed white through the worn fabric of her gloves. The mountains rose around them, their peaks still crowned with snow that would soon melt and swell the creeks to dangerous levels. Neither spoke for the first few miles. Bo concentrated on navigating the worst of the ruts while stealing occasional glances at the woman he'd just hired. In the clearer light of day, away from the shadows of the warehouse, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 28 or 30. Her face bore the pinched look of prolonged hunger, but her jaw was set with a determination he recognized. It was the look of someone who'd been knocked down many times but kept getting up. "Your children," Clara finally said, her voice barely audible above the creaking of the wagon. "Tell me about them." "Samuel's the eldest, 9, too serious for his age, but that's—" Bo paused, swallowing past the tightness in his throat. "That's been needful since his mother passed. Lucy's 5, sweet as honey, but she's got a cough that won't quit, and Thomas is 3, still asks for his mama every morning." Clara nodded slowly. "And their mother, your wife, she passed from lung fever?" 4 months back. Doctor couldn't come. Storm had the pass blocked. By the time it cleared," he shrugged, the gesture saying what words couldn't. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Hartley." The simple sincerity in her voice made him glance at her again. "What about you? Your husband?" A shadow crossed her features. "Mining accident, 2 years ago." She didn't elaborate, and something in the way she turned to look at the passing landscape told Bo not to press. The rest of the journey passed in silence, broken only by the splash of mud and the occasional snort from the horses. As they climbed the final rise before the ranch, Bo found himself seeing his home through a stranger's eyes. The main house was solid enough, 2 stories of hewn logs with a stone chimney, but the porch sagged at one corner and several shutters hung askew. The barn needed painting, and the chicken coop looked like a strong wind might knock it over. "It's not much," he said, suddenly defensive. "But it's weather-tight and the roof's good. It's more than I've had in months. Mr. Hartley." Clara replied quietly, "Where would you like me to stay?" Bo hadn't thought that far ahead. Mary's sewing room? No, that felt wrong somehow. "There's a room off the kitchen. Used to be for the hired hand when we could afford one. It's got a stove and a proper bed. That suit you?" "Yes, sir. That would be fine." As they pulled up to the house, the front door burst open and Thomas came running out. Samuel chasing after him. "Thomas, you're supposed to stay inside," Samuel called, but the 3-year-old was already at the wagon's edge. His round face turned up to study Clara with unabashed curiosity. "Who's that, Papa?" Thomas asked. "This is Mrs. Thompson. She's come to help with the house and cooking." Bo climbed down and lifted Thomas into his arms. "Where's Lucy?" "Sleeping," Samuel said, but his eyes were fixed on Clara with a mixture of suspicion and hope. "Her cough got worse after you left." Clara climbed down from the wagon without waiting for help, her movements careful but self-sufficient. She approached Samuel slowly, as one might approach a wary colt. "You must be Samuel," she said. "Your father tells me you've been taking fine care of your brother and sister." Samuel straightened slightly. "Yes, ma'am. I do my best." "I can see that. Perhaps you could show me where things are in the kitchen? I'd like to make something warm for your sister." The boy looked at his father, who nodded. Some of the wariness left Samuel's face. "Yes, ma'am. This way." The kitchen was a disaster. Dirty dishes piled in the dry sink, the stove cold and crusted with spilled food. Flour scattered across the floor where someone, probably Thomas, had gotten into it. Clara surveyed the mess without comment, already rolling up her sleeves. "First things first," she murmured. "Samuel, could you fetch me some water? And Mr. Hartley, if you could get a fire going in the stove." Within minutes, she had transformed from a hesitant stranger into a whirlwind of purposeful activity. Water heated while she scraped and scrubbed the stove top. The dishes were stacked for washing, the floor swept. She found a pot of beans that had been sitting too long and wrinkled her nose before setting it outside. "When did the children last have a proper meal?" she asked, checking the larder. Bo felt heat rise in his face. "I made biscuits yesterday, and there was bacon." "I see." Her tone held no judgment, but Bo felt judged all the same. She pulled out what supplies were available: some salt pork, dried beans, a few withered potatoes, cornmeal. "This will do for now. Samuel, is there a kitchen garden?" "Mama had one," the boy said quietly. "But it's all weeds now. We'll see about that come spring." Clara set about making what she called poor folks' soup. Beans and salt pork and whatever vegetables she could find. Stretched with water and seasoned with wild herbs, she sent Samuel to fetch from beside the creek. While the soup simmered, she went to check on Lucy. Bo followed, hovering in the doorway as Clara knelt beside the little girl's bed. Lucy's breathing was labored, her cheeks flushed with fever. "There now, sweet girl," Clara murmured, feeling the child's forehead. "Let's sit you up a bit, make it easier to breathe." She propped Lucy up with pillows, then disappeared back to the kitchen. She returned with a bowl of steaming water scented with something sharp and green. "Pine needles and mint," she explained to Bo. "Have her breathe the steam. It'll help clear her chest." She showed Samuel how to make a tent with a blanket to trap the steam, then returned to her cooking, the smell of real food, not burned, not half raw, began to fill the house. Thomas planted himself at the kitchen table, watching Clara's every move with fascination. "Are you our new mama?" he asked suddenly. Clara's hands stilled for just a moment. "No, sweetheart. I'm here to help take care of you and the house. You can call me Miss Clara." "Miss Clara," Thomas repeated, testing the words. "Can you make pie?" "When we have the fixings, yes. Mama made good pie." "I'm sure she did." Clara's voice was gentle. "What was her favorite kind to make?" "Apple," Samuel said from the doorway. "With cinnamon when we could get it?" Clara smiled at him. "Apple pie is one of my favorites, too. When the apples come in this fall, we'll make some together. Would you like that?" Samuel nodded slowly, and Bo saw some of the rigid control the boy held himself under start to ease. By evening, the kitchen was transformed. Clean dishes lined the shelves, the stove gleamed, and the floor was swept bare. The soup pot bubbled cheerfully, filling the house with warmth and the promise of a real meal. Even Lucy had managed to eat a small bowl, propped up in bed with Clara's help. After supper, Clara asked about her quarters. Bo showed her to the room off the kitchen, small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small stove for heat. "It's perfect," she said, setting down her carpet bag. "Thank you, Mr. Hartley." "Rules," Bo said abruptly. "I reckon we should set some. You'll have Sundays off, after breakfast is done. Wages on Saturday, no followers." He stopped, flushing. "That is, no gentlemen callers." Something flickered across Clara's face. Amusement? Bitterness? "That won't be a problem. Mr. Hartley, I'm not looking for—" "That? Good. That's good." He shifted awkwardly. "Children up at dawn. Breakfast by 6. I'll be out with the stock most days. Dinner at noon if I'm here. Supper at 6, regardless. Questions?" "Just one." Clara met his eyes directly. "Your rules. Am I permitted to discipline the children if needed?" Bo tensed. "What kind of discipline?" "Nothing harsh. Time sitting in the corner. Extra chores. I don't hold with beating children. Mr. Hartley, if that's your concern." He relaxed slightly. Neither did their mother. "Yes, that's acceptable. They're good children. Mostly just—" He struggled for words. "Just missing her. Aren't we all missing someone?" Clara said softly, then seemed to catch herself. "I'll do my best by them. Mr. Hartley, you have my word." That night, Bo lay in his too-empty bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of someone else in his house. He could hear Clara moving about in her room, settling in. Once, he heard what might have been muffled crying, quickly suppressed. He thought about Fletcher's crude words in town, about the gossip that would surely follow. A barren widow and a widowed rancher under the same roof. Tongues would wag. But then he heard Lucy's breathing, easier now after Clara's steam treatment, and decided he didn't much care what people said. In her narrow bed, Clara lay rigid, staring at the ceiling. The room was cold, but the blankets were clean and thick, luxury after months of sleeping in barns and alleys. Her body ached with exhaustion, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She touched the scar on her ribs, the one Jacob had given her the night he'd learned for certain she'd never bear children. "Useless woman," he'd called her. What good is a wife who can't give a man sons? But today, that little boy, Thomas, had looked at her with such trust, and Samuel, so young to be carrying such weight, had actually smiled when she'd praised his herb gathering. Even poor sick Lucy had squeezed her hand and whispered, "Thank you, Miss Clara." For the first time in 2 years, Clara felt something that might have been hope. It was fragile as spring ice, but it was there. She had work. She had a roof. She had children who needed her, even if they weren't hers. She closed her eyes and let herself imagine, just for a moment, that this could last, that she could make herself so useful, so necessary, that Bo Hartley would never send her away, that she could watch these children grow, help heal their hurt, maybe heal some of her own in the process. It was a dangerous dream for someone in her position, but in the darkness of her little room, with the wind howling outside and the house warm around her, Clara Mae Thompson allowed herself to dream it anyway. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. There would be gossip to face, trust to earn, wounds to navigate. But tonight, for the first time since Jacob's death and her shameful expulsion from his family's home, Clara had a place to belong, even if it was only temporary, even if it was built on necessity rather than affection. It was more than she'd had in longer than she cared to remember. In the main house, she heard one of the children cough, then settle. Without thinking, she half rose, ready to go check. Then she caught herself. Not yet. She wasn't their mother, would never be anyone's mother. But she could be what they needed now, someone to cook their meals and tend their hurts and keep their home running. It would have to be enough. And for now, it was everything. The weeks passed slowly, marked by the gradual retreat of winter and the tentative arrival of spring. Clara had been at the Double H Ranch for nearly a month now, and the house had transformed under her careful hands. The floors gleamed, the windows sparkled when sunlight hit them, and the smell of fresh bread had become a daily comfort. Lucy's cough had finally subsided, thanks to Clara's patient ministrations with steam and honey tonics. Thomas had stopped asking for his mama every morning, though sometimes Clara caught him staring at her with a wistful expression that made her heart ache. Samuel remained the most reserved, but even he had begun to warm to her presence, especially after she'd taught him to make Johnny cakes just the way he liked them. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Clara noticed something dark on the horizon. Storm clouds were building over the mountains, rolling down toward the valley with ominous speed. "Mr. Hartley," she called from the porch, where she'd been beating out rugs. "Storm coming." Bo looked up from the corral where he'd been working with a young horse. Even from a distance, she could see his frown as he studied the sky. He said something to Red Perkins, the hired hand who came by twice a week, then jogged toward the house. "Looks like a bad one," he said, wind already whipping at his hair. "Could be snow, late in the season for it, but these mountains don't follow any rules." They worked together to prepare, bringing in extra firewood, securing the shutters, making sure the animals were sheltered. The children helped, even little Thomas carrying in kindling with determined concentration. By evening, the storm had hit with full force. Snow mixed with sleet lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a living thing. Clara kept the stove stoked and hot stews simmering, trying to maintain an air of calm for the children's sake. "Tell us a story, Miss Clara," Lucy requested, cuddled close to her side on the worn sofa. Thomas was already drooping against her other shoulder, fighting sleep. "What kind of story would you like?" "A true one," Samuel said from his place by the fire. "From when you were little." Clara hesitated. Her childhood wasn't filled with the kind of stories children should hear, but she found a memory, one of the few good ones. "When I was about your age, Lucy, my grandmother, lived with us. She was from the old country, Ireland, and she knew all the old tales. On nights like this, she'd make what she called storm bread, a sweet bread with raisins and cinnamon." She was deep in the story when a loud crack echoed through the house. Thomas jerked awake with a cry. "Just a branch," Bo said, but he was already moving toward the door. "Probably hit the—" Another crack, and this time they heard splintering wood. Bo grabbed his coat. "Sounds like the barn roof. Red should have headed home hours ago. I need to check the animals." "You can't go out in this," Clara protested, rising from the sofa. "It's not safe. Those animals are our livelihood," he said firmly, already pulling on his boots. "Can't afford to lose even one." He was gone before she could argue further, swallowed by the white fury beyond the door. Clara stood frozen for a moment, remembering another night, another storm, another man who'd gone out and hadn't come back whole. "Will Papa be all right?" Lucy asked in a small voice. Clara forced a smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Your papa knows this ranch like the back of his hand. He'll be fine." But she moved to the window, straining to see through the swirling snow. Minutes passed like hours. The children huddled close, and Clara found herself telling story after story, her voice steady even as her hands trembled slightly. Where was he? What if he'd gotten turned around in the snow? What if the barn roof had collapsed while he was inside? 20 minutes? 30? The wind screamed harder. "I should go look," Samuel said, starting to rise. "Absolutely not." Clara's voice was sharper than she intended. "You'll stay right here where it's safe. Your father would never forgive me if—" The door burst open in a gust of snow and wind. Bo stumbled inside, more ice than man, his face raw with cold. Barn roof's damaged but holding. He gasped through chattering teeth. "Got the horses moved to the lean-to." Clara was already moving, pulling off his frozen coat, pushing him toward the fire. His hands were white with cold, and when she touched them, he flinched. "Can you feel your fingers?" "Some." He was shaking now, great shudders running through his frame. "Just need to warm up. Samuel, get blankets from the chest. Lucy, help me heat some water. Thomas, you sit right there and keep your papa company." She worked with efficient care, wrapping him in blankets, preparing hot water for his hands and feet. When she knelt to pull off his boots, he protested. "I can manage." "Hush." Her tone brooked no argument. You're no use to anyone if you lose fingers or toes to frostbite. His feet were pale but not white, which she took as a good sign. She wrapped them in warm towels, then forced him to drink cup after cup of hot coffee, liberally laced with sugar. Gradually, the violent shaking subsided to occasional shivers. Color returned to his face and hands. The children, seeing their father recovering, finally relaxed. "Time for bed," Clara announced, noting Thomas's drooping eyelids. "This storm's not going anywhere tonight." For once, there were no protests. Even Samuel went willingly, worn out from worry. Clara tucked them in, making sure extra blankets were piled on each bed. When she returned to the main room, Bo was staring into the fire, the blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. He looked up as she entered. "Thank you," he said simply, "for taking charge, he gestured vaguely. "I'm not used to being tended." Clara busied herself tidying the already tidy room. "You'd have done the same for anyone. My wife, Mary, she had a way about her in crisis. Calm, steady. You reminded me—" He trailed off, looking away. "I'm not trying to replace her," Clara said quietly. "I know I couldn't, even if I tried." "No." Bo's voice was rough. "No, you're not like her at all. She was sunshine and laughter. Easy smiles and gentle ways. He paused, seeming to search for words. "You're steel wrapped in cotton, soft on the outside for the children, but strong underneath. It's different." Clara didn't know how to respond to that, so she didn't. The fire crackled between them, and the storm continued its assault on the house. "Where did you learn it?" Bo asked suddenly. "The doctoring, the way you took control?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, softly, "When you're married to a man who comes home drunk and angry more often than not, you learn to handle crisis, broken bottles, broken furniture, broken bones. You learn, or you don't survive." Bo's hands clenched in the blanket. "Your husband, he hurt you?" "It doesn't matter now. He's dead." Her voice was flat, matter of fact. "Mining accident, like I said, though some might say it was justice. Him dying in the dark under tons of rock." "I wouldn't say that, of course. Christian charity and all." The bitterness in her tone could have etched glass. Bo found himself studying her profile in the firelight, seeing for the first time the fine scar along her jawline, the way she held herself always slightly guarded, ready to dodge or flee. "Is that why his family cast you out? Because I couldn't give him children?" "Yes, barren women have no value in some households. Mr. Hartley, Jacob made that quite clear, especially when he was in his cups. His mother agreed, said I was cursed by God, that I'd trapped her son with my wiles knowing I was damaged goods." Clara's hands twisted in her apron. Maybe she was right. Maybe I am cursed. "Don't!" The word came out harsher than Bo intended. "Don't say that. The ability to bear children doesn't determine a woman's worth." "Pretty words, Mr. Hartley. But we both know the world doesn't agree." They lapsed into silence. The storm seemed to be weakening, the wind's howl diminishing to a moan. Somewhere in the house, a shutter banged rhythmically. "I should check the children," Clara said, rising. "Make sure they're warm enough." "Clara!" Her name on his lips stopped her. It was the first time he'd used her given name. "I meant what I said. You're valued here, the children. They're blooming under your care. That's worth more than anything." She looked back at him, her face unreadable in the shadows. "For now, perhaps, but what happens when they don't need me anymore? When Lucy's completely well and Samuel's old enough to manage the house himself? What value will I have then?" She left before he could answer, her footsteps quiet on the stairs. Bo stayed by the fire, troubled by the resignation in her voice, the matter-of-fact way she spoke of her own dispensability. The truth was, he'd already begun to dread the thought of her leaving, not just for the children's sake, though they'd clearly come to depend on her, but for his own sake too. The house felt alive again with her in it. The loneliness that had threatened to suffocate him after Mary's death had retreated to manageable levels. And there were moments, like tonight, when she'd knelt before him, tending his frozen feet with a gentle efficiency, when he'd felt something stir that he'd thought died with Mary. Not love, not yet, but possibility, a whisper of what might be, if he was brave enough to reach for it. But that was foolishness. Clara had made it clear she was here for work, nothing more, and he was still too raw, too caught in grief's grip to offer anyone anything worthwhile. Better to keep things as they were, employer and employee. Nothing more. Still, as he banked the fire and headed to his cold bed, Beau found himself pausing at the foot of the stairs, listening. He could hear Clara's voice, soft and melodious, singing a lullaby to one of the children, an Irish song, by the sound of it, full of longing and hope intertwined. He stood there in the darkness, letting her voice wash over him, feeling something frozen inside begin to thaw. Tomorrow they'd return to careful distance, professional courtesy. But tonight, with the storm dying outside and her voice carrying through his home like a blessing, Beau allowed himself to feel grateful, not just for her help, but for her presence, complicated and guarded though it might be. The house settled around them, weathering the storm as it had weathered so many others. And in her small room, Clara finished her song and tried not to think about the look in Beau Hartley's eyes when he'd said her name. Tried not to hope for things that couldn't be, but hope, like spring itself, has a way of creeping in through the smallest cracks, taking root in the most unlikely ground. And as the storm finally passed and stars began to peek through the clouds, something new and fragile began to grow in the space between what was and what might be. Spring arrived in earnest over the next weeks, painting the valley in shades of green and gold. The snow retreated to the highest peaks, and wildflowers began dotting the meadows. Clara had transformed the neglected garden plot behind the house, coaxing vegetables from the soil with the same patient care she showed the children. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when the first sign of trouble appeared. Clara was hanging washing on the line while Lucy and Thomas played nearby, when she heard the sound of horses approaching. Multiple horses, which was unusual. Visitors to the Double H typically came alone or in pairs. 3 women rode into the yard, their faces shaded by proper bonnets, but their expressions clear enough. Clara recognized Mrs. Alma Patterson from the neighboring ranch, flanked by Mrs. Dorothy White, the minister's wife, and Mrs. Elizabeth Morrison from the general store. "Good afternoon," Clara said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Hartley is out with the herd, but I can—" "We've come to see you, Mrs. Thompson," Alma Patterson interrupted, her tone crisp as winter frost. "Might we speak privately?" Clara glanced at the children. Lucy had stopped playing and was watching with wide eyes. "Lucy, dear, would you take Thomas inside? There's fresh bread cooling. You may each have a slice with jam." Once the children were gone, Clara faced her visitors. "Would you care to come inside? I could make tea." "That won't be necessary," Mrs. White said. "We won't be staying long. We've come on a matter of Christian concern." Clara's stomach tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "Oh." Alma Patterson dismounted with surprising grace for a woman of her years. The others followed suit, forming a semicircle around Clara like judges at a trial. "Mrs. Thompson," Alma began, "we understand you've been residing here for nearly 2 months now." "6 weeks. Yes, Mr. Hartley hired me to tend house and care for the children." "Yes, about that arrangement." Mrs. Morrison's nose wrinkled as if she smelled something distasteful. "It's become a subject of considerable talk in town. A widow living under the same roof as a widowed man, with no chaperone, no proper boundaries." "I have my own quarters," Clara said evenly, "and my focus is entirely on the children and household duties." "Nevertheless," Mrs. White interjected, "the appearance of impropriety is nearly as damaging as impropriety itself. Surely you understand the delicate position this puts Mr. Hartley in, his reputation, the children's future standing in the community." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her voice level. The children were suffering when I arrived. Sick, underfed, struggling with their grief. Now they're healthy and cared for. I fail to see how that damages anyone. Because you're not thinking clearly, Alma said, not unkindly. My dear, we know about your circumstances. Your inability to bear children. Your husband's family's rejection. It's understandable that you'd grasp at any position offered. But surely you see how this looks. A barren woman, desperate for children, insinuating herself into a grieving family. The words hit like physical blows, each one carefully aimed at her deepest wounds. Clara's hands clenched in her skirts. Some are saying, Mrs. Morrison lowered her voice conspiratorially. That you've set your cap at Mr. Hartley, that you're using those poor motherless children to trap him into marriage. That's not— Clara stopped herself, breathing deeply. I have no such intentions. I'm here to work, nothing more. Then prove it, Mrs. White said firmly. Leave. Find employment elsewhere. Somewhere more appropriate, Mrs. Morrison knows of a position in Denver, a widowed aunt needing a companion. Respectable work for a woman in your position. Clara's mind raced. Leave? Now. When Lucy had finally lost that awful cough. When Thomas ran to greet her each morning. When even careful Samuel had begun to trust her with his fears and hopes. I can't, she said quietly. I won't abandon those children. Alma's expression hardened. Can't or won't? Because I assure you, Mrs. Thompson, if you persist in this inappropriate arrangement, we'll have no choice but to make our concerns more public. The minister has already expressed reservations about allowing the Hartley children to attend Sunday school under such circumstances. Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. To have the children shunned, to have their innocent hearts bear the weight of adult judgment. It was unbearable. You don't understand, she began. But Mrs. Morrison cut her off. We understand perfectly. You're a woman with nothing, clinging to what isn't yours. But consider this. If you truly care for those children as you claim, you'll do what's best for them. And what's best is a proper mother, not a barren stranger playing house. The women remounted their horses, satisfied with their Christian duty, as they rode away. Alma looked back. 2 weeks, Mrs. Thompson. Make your arrangements, for everyone's sake. Clara stood in the yard long after they'd gone, her whole body trembling. She'd been foolish to think she could have even this, a job, a purpose, a family that wasn't hers but that she'd grown to love. The world had ways of reminding women like her of their place. Miss Clara, Lucy's voice came from the doorway. Are you crying? Clara quickly wiped her eyes. No, sweetheart, just some dust from the road. Those ladies weren't very nice. Lucy observed with a child's clarity. I didn't like how they looked at you. They meant well. Clara lied. Now, how was that bread? The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Clara went through the motions, preparing supper, mending Samuel's torn shirt, helping Thomas with his letters. But her mind was elsewhere. Planning, calculating. She had some wages saved. Enough perhaps for stage fare to Denver. The thought of being a companion to some elderly woman, confined to stuffy rooms and endless tedium, made her soul shrivel. But what choice did she have? When Beau returned at sunset, dusty and tired from moving cattle, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Clara served supper with her usual efficiency, but she wouldn't meet his eyes, and her responses to the children's chatter were distracted. After the children were abed, Beau found her in the kitchen, packing dishes away with unnecessary force. What happened? He asked without preamble. Nothing of consequence. She didn't turn around. Clara. He moved closer. What happened? She stilled, then slowly faced him. In the lamplight, he could see she'd been crying, though she'd tried to hide it. I had visitors today. Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. White, and Mrs. Morrison. Beau's expression darkened. The trinity of moral judgment. What did those biddies want? Despite everything, Clara's lips twitched at his description. To save your reputation and the children's, it seems my presence here has become problematic. Problematic? He said the word like it tasted bad. Let me guess. Improper for a woman to work in a man's house? Scandal and shame. Think of the children? Something like that. Clara turned back to her dishes. They made some valid points. Valid? Clara, look at me. When she didn't, he gently touched her shoulder. She flinched, but turned. What did they say to you? The truth. Her voice was barely a whisper. That I'm a barren woman with nothing, playing at being mother to children who aren't mine, that I'm damaging their reputation, their future, that if I cared for them at all, I'd leave. Beau's hand tightened on her shoulder. That's not the truth. That's poison dressed up as concern. Is it? Clara pulled away. They threatened to have the children barred from Sunday school, to make things difficult for you in town. Can you afford that? Can the children? What I can't afford is to lose you. The words came out fierce and sudden, surprising them both. Beau ran a hand through his hair. I mean, the children can't afford it. Lucy's finally healthy. Thomas smiles again. And Samuel? He's starting to act like a boy instead of a tiny adult carrying the world. They could adjust to someone else, someone more appropriate. Appropriate. Beau spat the word. You know what's appropriate? Children being loved and cared for. A house that feels like a home again. That's what you've given us. Clara, that's what matters. But the talk will happen regardless. If not about this, then about something else. That's what small towns do. They talk. He moved closer, and Clara found herself trapped between him and the wash basin. Don't let them chase you away, please. There was something in his eyes, a vulnerability she'd never seen before. It made her chest tight and her resolve waver. They gave me 2 weeks, she heard herself say, to make arrangements. Then we have 2 weeks to figure something out. His hand found hers, calloused fingers gentle around her work-worn ones. Don't give up yet. A sound from the doorway made them spring apart. Samuel stood there in his nightshirt, his young face serious. I heard voices, he said, but his eyes were on their quickly separated hands. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, Beau said. Just discussing tomorrow's chores. Samuel looked between them, and Clara saw understanding dawn in his eyes, too much understanding for a 9-year-old. Miss Clara, he said quietly, you're not leaving, are you, because of those women who came today? Clara's heart broke a little. How did you? I heard Lucy talking to Thomas. She said the mean ladies wanted you to go away. He stepped into the room, suddenly looking very young. Please don't go. We need you. Samuel, Beau began, but the boy continued. I know I wasn't very nice at first. I thought if I liked you, it meant I was forgetting Mama. But that's not true, is it? Mama would want us to be happy. She'd want Lucy to be well and Thomas to laugh, and she'd want someone to take care of Papa, too. Clara felt tears threaten. This brave, too-old boy was offering her absolution she hadn't even known she needed. Oh, Samuel, she said softly, your Mama raised a very wise young man. Then you'll stay? She looked at Beau, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I'll try, she said finally. I'll try. Samuel nodded, satisfied, and bid them good night. After he left, Clara and Beau stood in the warm kitchen, the weight of unspoken words heavy between them. I should go, Clara said finally. Early morning tomorrow. Clara, wait. Beau caught her hand as she passed. What Samuel said, about someone taking care of me, too, you should know. These weeks, having you here, it's not just about the children anymore. She stood very still, afraid to breathe, afraid to hope. Mr. Hartley, Beau, he corrected softly. Just Beau. Beau. His name felt dangerous on her lips. We can't. You know we can't. Even if we wanted to, it would only prove them right. Would it be so terrible? His thumb traced circles on her wrist. To prove them right? She pulled her hand free, though it cost her. Good night, Bo. She fled to her room, closing the door firmly behind her, but she could still feel the warmth of his hand, still see the longing in his eyes. 2 weeks. The women had given her 2 weeks to decide between safety and scandal, between running and staying, between a half-life alone and the terrifying possibility of love. Summer had settled over the valley like a warm blanket, bringing with it long days and star-filled nights, despite the ultimatum from the town's moral guardians. Clara had stayed, though she'd been careful to maintain even more propriety than before. She rose before dawn, retired after dark, and kept her interactions with Bo strictly professional during daylight hours. But the nights were different. It had started innocently enough, a shared cup of coffee on the porch after the children were asleep, discussing the next day's tasks. Then it became a ritual, these stolen moments under the vast Colorado sky, when they could drop their careful masks and just be Clara and Bo, not employer and housekeeper. Tonight was especially warm, the kind of July evening that made the mountains look purple in the fading light. Clara sat in her usual chair, mending one of Thomas's shirts by feel more than sight. Bo occupied the other chair, a respectable distance away, though she was acutely aware of every movement he made. "Corn's looking good," he said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Best crop in years. Thanks to that garden you started. The children helped." Clara replied, her needle flashing in the moonlight. "Lucy has quite the green thumb. She's blooming herself. All of them are." He paused, then added quietly, "Thanks to you." Clara kept her eyes on her mending. These moments of gratitude were dangerous. They made her want things she couldn't have. "I'm just doing my job." "No." His voice was firm. "You're doing much more than that, and we both know it." She did look up then, finding his eyes already on her. In the moonlight, his face was all plains and shadows, handsome in a weathered way that made her chest tight. "Bo, I know," he said. "I know all the reasons why we shouldn't. God knows I've listed them to myself 100 times. But Clara," he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm tired of pretending I don't feel what I feel." Her hands stilled on the fabric. "And what do you feel?" "Like I'm alive again," he said simply. "For months after Mary died, I was just going through the motions, getting through each day for the children's sake. Then you arrived, and suddenly there was light in this house again. Not just for them, for me too." Clara set aside her mending, her hands trembling slightly. "You're still grieving. What you feel, it might just be gratitude mixed with loneliness. Is that what you tell yourself about what you feel?" He moved his chair closer, close enough that she could smell the leather and sunshine scent of him. "That it's just gratitude?" "What I feel doesn't matter," she whispered. "It matters to me." He reached out, covering her clasped hands with one of his. "Clara, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I need you to know. In case those vultures convince you to leave, I need you to know that you're wanted here. Not just needed, wanted." The weight of his hand on hers was almost unbearable in its tenderness. How long since someone had touched her with genuine care? Not since her grandmother, probably. Certainly not during her marriage to Jacob. "I dream about it sometimes," she admitted, the words pulled from some deep place. "Having a real home, a family, children to love, even if they're not." She stopped, unable to finish. "Even if they're not yours by birth," Bo completed gently. "But Clara, don't you see, they already love you like you're theirs. And as for the other," his hand tightened on hers, "there are all kinds of families, all kinds of love. What matters is choosing each other." She looked at their joined hands, his sun-browned and scarred from work, hers pale despite the garden work, both showing the evidence of hard lives lived. Slowly, she turned her palm up, letting their fingers intertwine. "I'm frightened," she admitted. "Of me?" There was pain in his voice. "No, never of you." She met his eyes. "Of wanting this too much, of believing it could last, of letting myself love those children completely when I might have to leave them. Then don't leave. He lifted their joined hands, pressing his lips to her knuckles. Stay, not as the housekeeper, as my wife. The words hung in the night air like stars. Clara's breath caught. Beau, you don't mean… I do mean it. I've been thinking about it for weeks. Marry me, Clara. Make this real. But Mary is gone, he said gently but firmly. And she'd be the first to tell me to grab happiness where I find it. She was practical like that. She'd look at you, see how you love our children, how you've brought life back to this place, and she'd probably scold me for waiting this long to ask. Clara pulled her hand free, standing abruptly. She walked to the porch rail, looking out at the moonlit valley. People would talk. They'd say I trapped you, just like those women predicted. Let them talk. He came up behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. What do I care for their gossip when I could have you beside me? When the children could have you as their mother in truth? I can't give you more children, she said, the old shame rising. You're still young enough. You could marry someone who could give you sons to carry on the ranch. Clara, look at me. When she didn't turn, he gently caught her shoulders, turning her to face him. I don't need more children. I need someone to love the ones I have. Someone to build a life with. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am. She searched his face, looking for doubt, for resignation, for anything that suggested this was mere convenience or desperation. Instead, she found only steady certainty and something that looked dangerously like love. It wouldn't be proper to answer tonight, she said weakly. A lady should consider. He silenced her with a kiss, not demanding or passionate, but gentle, questioning, full of promise. Clara had been kissed before, Jacob's rough claiming, bruising and taking. This was nothing like that. This was giving and asking, worship and wonder. When they parted, she was trembling. That wasn't proper either. She managed. No, he agreed, not looking remotely sorry. But I've been wanting to do that since the night you saved my feet from frostbite. Despite everything, she laughed, a small, surprised sound. That's what won you over? My nursing skills? That's what started it, he corrected. But it was everything after. The way you hum when you're cooking. How you know just when Thomas needs a hug or when to let Samuel work through his moods. The way you've made this house a home again. His hand slid down to capture hers. The way you look in the morning light when you don't know I'm watching. Beau. His name was half plea, half prayer. Think about it, he said. That's all I ask. Think about staying, not as an employee, but as family, real family. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He squeezed her hands once more, then stepped back. I should check the livestock, he said, though they both knew it was an excuse to give her space. Good night, Clara. Good night, she whispered. After he left, Clara sank into her chair, legs unsteady, married. He wanted to marry her, not because he needed a housekeeper or the children needed care, but because he wanted her. Clara May Thompson, barren woman, cast-off wife. Nobody from nowhere. She thought of Lucy's trusting eyes, Thomas's chubby arms around her neck, Samuel's rare but precious smiles. Thought of Beau's work-worn hands gentle on hers, his lips soft against her knuckles. Thought of waking every day in this house, not as an employee, but as its mistress, with the right to love these people openly and fully. The moon was high when she finally went inside, in her small room. She sat on the narrow bed and tried to imagine trading it for the big bedroom upstairs, sharing that space with Beau. The thought made her flush with heat that had nothing to do with the summer night. She'd told him she was frightened, and that was true. But beneath the fear was something else, a wild, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have this. A second chance at everything Jacob had made her believe she didn't deserve. Through her window, she could see Beau by the barn, checking the horses as he'd said. Even from here, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept looking back at the house, waiting, wondering. Clara rose and went to her small trunk, pulling out her best dress, a deep blue cotton she'd made herself during the early days of her first marriage, when she'd still believed in happily ever after. She'd kept it through everything, though she couldn't say why. Now, holding it up, she wondered if perhaps she'd been saving it for this, for a moment when she might believe in happiness again. Tomorrow, she decided, tomorrow she would give him her answer. Tonight, she would allow herself to dream of a life where she truly belonged, where Clara was home at last. In the barn, Beau leaned against Buttercup's stall, his heart still racing from that kiss. He'd been too forward. He knew. Should have courted her properly, given her time, but time felt precious suddenly, like something that could be snatched away by gossiping women or Clara's own fears. "What do you think, girl?" he asked the mare. "Did I mess it all up?" Buttercup whickered softly, nuzzling his shoulder. "Mary always said I was too impulsive," he continued. "But sometimes a man knows what's right. And Clara, she's right for us, for all of us." He thought of his late wife, wondering if she'd approve. Mary had been sunshine where Clara was moonlight, laughter where Clara was quiet strength. But both women had the same core of steel, the same fierce love for children, the same way of making a house feel like home. "I'll always love you," he whispered to the night, to Mary's memory. "But I think it's time to love again. I think you'd want that for me, for them." The night wind carried no answer, but in his heart, Beau felt a kind of peace. Tomorrow would bring what it brought, but tonight, he'd kissed Clara Mae Thompson under the stars, and she hadn't pulled away. For now, that was enough. In the house, 3 children slept peacefully, unaware that their world might be about to change again, but this time, the change would be one of joy, not sorrow. This time, it would be a beginning, not an ending. And in her narrow bed, Clara lay awake, her lips still tingling from Beau's kiss, her heart daring to hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found her place in the world. The morning after Beau's proposal dawned bright and clear, but Clara had barely slept. She moved through her morning routines mechanically, starting the stove, mixing biscuit dough, setting the table, all while her mind churned. She had just placed the coffee pot on the stove when she heard horses approaching. Through the kitchen window, she saw a lone rider dismounting, a man she didn't recognize. He was tall and lean, dressed in the worn leather of a bounty hunter, with cold eyes that swept the ranch with professional assessment. Something about him made her skin prickle with unease. "Can I help you?" Beau's voice came from the porch. He must have seen the stranger from the barn. "Looking for someone," the man said, his voice carrying a flat, Midwest accent. "Woman by the name of Clara Mae Thornton, though she might be going by Thompson now." Clara's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against the wall, out of sight from the window. "Don't know anyone by that name," Beau said evenly. The stranger smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No? That's strange. Word in town is you've got a housekeeper. Widow woman, dark hair, about ya high." He held up his hand at Clara's height. "Pretty thing, despite being barren as desert sand. I asked if I could help you." Beau repeated, his tone hardening. "State your business or move on." "My business is with the woman. Name's Jed Thornton. She's my wife." Clara's knees nearly buckled. Jed, alive. The mining accident, it had all been a lie to escape. And now he'd found her. "You're mistaken," Beau said. "The woman working here is a widow. Her husband died 2 years back." Jed laughed. An ugly sound. "Is that what she told you? Let me guess. Mining accident? Cave-in? That's her favorite story." He pulled out a worn piece of paper. "Got our marriage certificate right here, legal and binding. That woman belongs to me, and I mean to take her back. Even if this woman you're looking for was here," Beau said carefully, "she'd be her own person. Slavery's been over for 20 years, case you hadn't heard. Don't get smart with me. Rancher?" Jed's hand moved to his gun belt. "A wife's got obligations, legal ones. And Clara, well, she's got debts to pay. Years of keeping her fed and clothed with nothing in return. No sons, no daughters, nothing but a dry womb and a sharp tongue. Clara heard footsteps on the stairs, the children waking. Panic seized her. They couldn't see this, couldn't be part of it. She forced herself to move, intercepting Samuel in the hallway. "Keep your brother and sister upstairs," she whispered urgently. "No matter what you hear." "Miss Clara, what's wrong?" "Please, Samuel, just do as I say." The boy nodded, recognizing the seriousness in her tone. Clara straightened her spine, smoothed her apron, and walked out onto the porch. "Hello, Jed," she said quietly. His face split into a predatory grin. "There she is, my wandering wife. You've led me quite a chase. Clara May." "I'm not your wife," she said, amazed at how steady her voice sounded. "You're dead. I mourned you." "Mourned me?" He laughed again. "Is that what you call running off in the night with my money, leaving me for dead after that little accident with the lantern?" Bo looked between them, understanding dawning. "You're the one who hurt her." "Disciplined," Jed corrected. "A man's got rights in his own home, though from the looks of things, she's found herself another protector. Tell me, rancher, she spread her legs for you yet, or is she still playing the virtuous widow?" The crude words hung in the morning air like a slap. Bo stepped forward, but Clara caught his arm. "Don't," she said quietly. "He's not worth it." "Listen to her," Jed advised. "She knows what happens when menfolk get riled on her account. Don't you, wife?" Clara's hand unconsciously went to her side, where the deepest scar hid beneath her dress. "What do you want, Jed?" "What's mine? You, or—" His eyes swept the ranch appraisingly. "Compensation for my loss. Man spends years feeding and housing a woman. He's owed something when she runs, say, $100. "You're selling her?" Bo's voice was disgusted. "Collecting a debt," Jed corrected. "Though I'd rather have her back. She's got skills, even if she can't breed. Knows how to keep house, how to keep quiet when told, usually." His eyes glittered with remembered violence. Sometimes needed reminding, but she learned. "I'll get your money," Clara said quickly. "I have wages saved." "You'll do no such thing," Bo interrupted. "This man has no claim on you." "Legal wife," Jed said, waving the certificate again. "Unless you got proof otherwise." Clara felt trapped, the morning sun suddenly too bright, the air too thin. All her running, all her careful building of a new life, undone by one piece of paper and a man who should have been dead. "Give us an hour," Bo said suddenly, "to discuss this." Jed considered. 1 hour. Then I want my wife or my money. Try anything funny, and I'll have the sheriff out here. Kidnapping's a serious charge, especially when children are involved. His gaze went to the house meaningfully. "Pretty place. Shame if it got all tangled up in legal troubles." The threat was clear. Clara felt sick. 1 hour, Bo agreed. Jed remounted his horse. "I'll be in town, the saloon. Don't make me come back out here." After he rode away, Clara sank onto the porch step, shaking. Bo knelt beside her. "Clara, talk to me. Is he really your husband?" "Was," she whispered. I hoped he was dead. The mine shaft collapsed with him in it. I didn't cause it, whatever he says, but I didn't try to get help either. I just ran." "Because he beat you." It wasn't a question. Clara nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "For 5 years. It got worse after the doctor said I couldn't have children, said I'd trapped him with a barren womb, said I owed him sons, and since I couldn't give them—" She trailed off. "So you ran." "I took some money," she admitted, "from his strongbox. Enough to get away. I suppose that makes me a thief as well as a runaway wife." Bo was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, pulling her up with him. "Go inside. Get the children ready for town. Bo, we're going to end this. Today." His face was set with determination. "Get your things too, all of them." "You're sending me away?" The words came out small and broken. He cupped her face in his hands. "I'm taking you to town to marry me. Today, Now, before that bastard can interfere. Clara's eyes widened. But he's my husband. Legal? You said the mine collapsed 2 years ago, and he never came looking until now. Beau's smile was grim. In Colorado, abandonment for over a year dissolves a marriage. Judge Carter explained it to the widow Martinez last year when her no-good husband turned up after 3 years. If Jed abandoned you for 2 years, you're free to remarry. Hope bloomed in Clara's chest, fragile as spring flowers. But he'll fight it. He'll make trouble. Let him try. Beau's hands were steady on her face. I asked you to marry me last night. Clara Mae Thompson. I'm asking again now. Will you have me? She thought of Jed's cruel eyes, his casual ownership of her. Then she looked at Beau, steady, strong Beau, who'd never raised a hand to her, who asked rather than demanded, who offered protection not as a cage but as a gift. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Then let's go. Samuel, he called. Get your brother and sister dressed in their Sunday best. We're going to town. The ride to town was tense. Clara constantly looking over her shoulder for Jed, but they made it to the small church without incident. Reverend White looked surprised to see them. Mr. Hartley? Is everything all right? We need you to perform a marriage, Beau said. Now. The Reverend's eyebrows rose. I see. And do you have the proper documentation? Witnesses? Doc Wilson and Tom Morrison can witness, Beau said. As for documentation, Clara's first husband abandoned her 2 years ago. That makes her free to remarry under Colorado law, doesn't it? Well, yes, if proper abandonment can be proven. The Reverend looked uncomfortable. Mr. Hartley, I feel I should mention that my wife expressed some concerns about the propriety of your current arrangement, which is why we're here to make it proper, Beau said firmly. Will you marry us or not? The Reverend hesitated, then nodded. Let me get my book. While he was gone, Clara tried to smooth her simple dress. I'm not dressed for a wedding, she fretted. You're perfect, Beau assured her. Then, to the children, how do you three feel about Miss Clara becoming your new mama? Really? Lucy's face lit up. Forever and always. If you'll have me, Clara said softly. Thomas threw his arms around her legs. Mama, Clara. Even Samuel smiled. It's about time, he said with 9-year-old wisdom. The ceremony was quick and simple. Doc Wilson and Tom Morrison served as witnesses, both looking pleased despite the circumstances. Clara barely heard the words, too aware of Beau's warm hand holding hers, of the children clustered close, of the new name she was taking. Hartley. Clara Hartley. It sounded like belonging. I now pronounce you man and wife. Reverend White concluded, you may kiss your bride. This kiss was different from last night's, brief, proper, but with a promise of more to come. When they parted, Clara was Mrs. Beau Hartley and Jed Thornton had no claim on her. They were just leaving the church when Jed appeared, his face dark with anger. What's this then? He demanded. You think a quick ceremony changes anything? As a matter of fact, it does. Doc Wilson spoke up. Mrs. Hartley here is a married woman. Any claim you might have had is dissolved. She was already married. To me. Were you? Judge Carter had emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. When did you last see your wife? Mr. Thornton. And that's none of your... It's very much my business if you're claiming marital rights. The judge interrupted. When did you last see her? Jed's jaw worked. 2 years back, but 2 years. And you made no effort to find her? No contact? No support? She ran off. That constitutes abandonment under territorial law. Judge Carter said firmly, your marriage is dissolved. This woman is free to remarry, which it appears she's done. Any further harassment of Mrs. Hartley will be met with legal consequences. Jed's hand twitched toward his gun, but the sheriff had appeared, standing casually but ready. I'd think real careful about your next move, Sheriff Watson advised. For a long moment, the street was silent. Then Jed spat in the dust at Clara's feet. Keep her then, he snarled at Beau. barren bitch ain't worth the trouble anyway. But this ain't over. I'm owed something for my troubles." He stalked away, and Clara sagged against Bo with relief. "It's done," she whispered. "It's really done. It's just beginning," he corrected, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Let's go home, Mrs. Hartley." The ride back to the ranch was different from the tense journey to town. The children chattered excitedly about having a real mama now. Clara held the marriage certificate like a talisman, still hardly believing. As they crested the rise to the ranch, Bo reached over and took her hand. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. Clara looked at him, this good man who'd stood up for her, who'd claimed her when she had nothing to offer but herself, and smiled. "No regrets," she confirmed. "Though you might have some when you realize you've married a woman who can't give you more children." "Clara Hartley," he said firmly, "I married you for you, not for what you can or can't give me, but for who you are. The woman who saved my children, who brought life back to my home, who makes me want to see tomorrow. That's enough, more than enough." The children had run ahead into the house, their voices bright with excitement. Clara and Bo sat in the wagon a moment longer, hands linked, hearts finally at peace. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hartley," Bo said softly. "I've been home since the day you brought me here." Clara replied, "I just didn't know it yet." They climbed down from the wagon together, walking into their house as husband and wife, ready to face whatever came next as a family. Behind them, the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of hope and promise. And somewhere in town, Jed Thornton drank himself into a stupor and made plans that would soon bring everything crashing down. But for now, for this moment, there was only joy. 3 days had passed since the hasty wedding, and Clara was still adjusting to being Mrs. Hartley. The children had taken to calling her Mama Clara with an ease that made her heart ache with happiness. Even the work felt different now, hanging wash on the line. She could see her wedding ring glint in the sunlight, a constant reminder that she belonged here by right, not just by employment. But the peace was shattered on a Thursday morning when Sheriff Watson rode up to the ranch, his face grim. "Bo around?" he asked Clara, who was working in the garden with Lucy. "In the barn," Clara replied, a knot of worry forming in her stomach. "Is something wrong?" Watson hesitated. "Maybe you should come too, Mrs. Hartley." The formal use of her new name did nothing to ease her anxiety. She told Lucy to go inside and watch her brothers, then followed Watson to the barn where Bo was mending harnesses. "Sheriff," Bo greeted, setting down his tools. "What brings you out here?" "Jed Thornton," Watson said without preamble. "He's been making noise in town, talking to anyone who'll listen about how you stole his wife, how he's owed compensation. Yesterday he filed a formal complaint." Clara's hand found Bo's automatically. "On what grounds?" "Theft, for one. Claims you took money when you left. Also says the marriage isn't valid, that you weren't properly divorced." Watson shifted uncomfortably. "And he's been talking to some of the ladies in town, Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. White, filling their ears with stories about your marriage, private things that shouldn't be spoken of in public." Heat flooded Clara's face. She could imagine what Jed had been saying, crude, humiliating things designed to shame her. He's also claiming alienation of affection against Bo. Watson continued. "Says you lured his wife away, knowing she was married. That's ridiculous," Bo said flatly. "I hired Clara as a housekeeper. Didn't even know about Thornton until he showed up here." "I believe you," Watson said. "But Judge Carter says we need to have a proper hearing. Sort this out, legal-like. It's set for Saturday at the town hall." A hearing? Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Like a trial? More informal than that, Watson assured her. "But yes, both sides will present their case. You'll want to bring any documentation you have about the abandonment. Witnesses who can speak to your character, that sort of thing." After the sheriff left, Clara sank onto a hay bale. her legs suddenly weak. 2 years, she whispered. 2 years of freedom, and he still has the power to destroy everything. Bo knelt before her, taking her hands. He won't. We won't let him. You don't understand what he's capable of. Clara said, the things he'll say, Bo, he'll tell everyone about our private life. He'll make it sound sordid, make me sound like... She couldn't finish. Like what? A woman who escaped a brutal marriage? Who survived years of abuse? There's no shame in that. Clara, the town won't see it that way. You know they won't. They already think I'm a scheming woman who trapped you. This will just confirm it. Then we'll face them together, Bo said firmly, as husband and wife. The next 2 days were a flurry of preparation. Doc Wilson agreed to testify about treating Clara's injuries when she first arrived in town. Bruises and cuts she'd explained away as traveling accidents. Tom Morrison would speak to her character, how she'd been seeking honest work when Bo hired her. Even Reverend White, despite his wife's disapproval, agreed to testify that the marriage was performed properly. But Clara knew it wouldn't be enough, not when Jed had poison to spread and eager ears to hear it. Saturday dawned gray and oppressive, with storm clouds gathering over the mountains. The town hall was packed. It seemed everyone in Mercy's Bend had come to witness the spectacle. Clara kept her head high as she entered with Bo, though she could hear the whispers following them like smoke. Judge Carter called for order. He was a fair man, Clara knew, but even fair men could be swayed by public opinion. We're here to address the complaint brought by Mr. Jed Thornton regarding the validity of the recent marriage between Bo Hartley and the former Clara May Thornton. Mr. Thornton, you may present your case. Jed stood, dressed in his best clothes, but still managing to look disreputable. His eyes found Clara and gleamed with malicious satisfaction. Your Honor, that woman there is my legal wife. We were married in Denver 5 years ago. He produced the marriage certificate with a flourish. She abandoned me 2 years back, stealing $40 from my strongbox when she left. Can you prove the theft? Judge Carter asked. My word against hers, Jed admitted. But the fact remains, she left without cause, without word. A wife doesn't have the right to just up and leave her husband. Did you attempt to locate her? I was injured, Your Honor. Mining accident left me laid up for months. By the time I recovered, the trail was cold. Clara bit her tongue. The accident had been a drunken fall into a shallow shaft, and his injuries hadn't stopped him from visiting the saloons 2 days later. And what cause did Clara have for leaving? The judge asked. Jed's expression turned wounded. No cause at all. I provided for her, kept a roof over her head. It's true we had our troubles. What marriage doesn't? She couldn't give me children, which was a disappointment. But I stood by her, even when folks said I should put her aside for a real woman who could breed. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. Bo placed his hand over hers, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone. Sometimes she needed correction. Jed continued, warming to his theme. She had a sharp tongue, liked to argue, but I never did more than any husband might to keep peace in his home, and for her to repay my patience by running off, then taking up with another man while still married. He shook his head. It's adultery, plain and simple. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Clara could see Mrs. Patterson nodding righteously. Mr. Hartley. Judge Carter said, Your response? Bo stood slowly. Your Honor, I hired Mrs. Thompson, as she called herself, as a housekeeper. My wife had died. My children needed care. She told me she was widowed, and I had no reason to doubt her. It wasn't until Mr. Thornton appeared that I learned otherwise. Yet you married her immediately after learning the truth. Jed interjected. Mighty convenient. I married her, Bo said steadily, because by then I'd come to know her character. A woman who'd never raised her voice to my children, who tended them through illness, who worked from dawn to dusk without complaint. If she fled Mr. Thornton, I could only conclude she had good reason. And what reason would that be? Jed demanded. A woman's duty is to her husband, for better or worse. That's what the vows say. May I speak, Your Honor? Clara's quiet voice cut through the noise. Judge Carter nodded. She stood on unsteady legs, facing the packed hall. Mr. Thornton asks what reason I had for leaving. The truth is, I left to save my life. Dramatics, Jed scoffed. You never what? Clara turned to face him directly. Never backhanded me for burning the biscuits? Never took a belt to me for speaking to the neighbor man about borrowing flour? Never threw me down the stairs when Doc Millerson told you I'd likely never carry a child to term? The hall had gone silent. Clara's voice grew stronger. You ask for proof. I have it. She began unbuttoning the high collar of her dress. Every scar tells a story. Mr. Thornton, shall I show them? Clara, no, Bo said softly, but she shook her head. They want to know why I left? Let them see. She pulled her collar aside, revealing the white line along her throat. This one's from a broken bottle. The night you came home from the saloon and found I'd mended your shirt with the wrong color thread. Gasps echoed through the hall. Even Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. Clara touched her ribs. 3 broken, winter of '84. You said I was too slow bringing your supper. Her hand moved to her arm. Burn scar here, from when you held my wrist against the stove to teach me not to waste lamp oil. Lies, Jed sputtered. She's making it up for sympathy. Am I? Clara looked at Doc Wilson. Doctor, you treated me when I first arrived in town. What did you see? The elderly physician stood slowly. Bruises in various stages of healing, cuts on her hands and arms, malnutrition, clear signs of long-term abuse. A hard journey, Jed began. I've treated enough beaten women to know the difference. Doc Wilson said firmly. Don't insult my intelligence or my experience, Mr. Thornton. Clara rebuttoned her collar with steady hands. You ask why I left? I left because I wanted to live, because even a barren woman deserves that chance. I took $40. Yes, wages for 5 years of unpaid labor, 5 years of being your servant, your nurse, your punching bag when the mood took you. Even if true, Jed said desperately. She was still my wife. She had no right. She had every right. A new voice spoke from the back of the hall. A woman stepped forward, elderly, dignified, a face Clara recognized with shock. Mrs. Thornton? Clara gasped. Jed's mother. The older woman walked to the front, her cane tapping against the floor. I've held my peace for too long, she said, hoping my son would change, would become the man his father was, but I won't stand by while he pursues this good woman further. Mother, Jed started. Silence. Her voice cracked like a whip. Your Honor, I can testify to my son's treatment of his wife. I saw the bruises, heard the screams. I told Clara to endure, that it was a wife's lot. God forgive me, I was wrong. She turned to Clara. I came as soon as I heard he was pursuing you, to make amends, if possible. And to tell the truth, my son abandoned his marriage long before Clara left. He abandoned it every time he raised his hand to her. The silence in the hall was deafening. Jed's face had gone white, then red. You'd take her side over your own blood? He snarled. I side with truth, Mrs. Thornton replied. Something you've been a stranger to most of your life. Judge Carter cleared his throat. I believe I've heard enough, Mr. Thornton. Do you deny the accusations of abuse? Jed's jaw worked. A man has rights in his own home, he said finally. If discipline was needed, that's answer enough. The judge said. Colorado law is clear. Abandonment can be physical or constructive. A pattern of abuse that forces a spouse to flee for safety constitutes constructive abandonment. Furthermore, Mr. Thornton made no effort to locate his wife for 2 years, which confirms actual abandonment as well. He looked at Clara with something like kindness. Mrs. Hartley, your marriage to Mr. Hartley is valid and binding. Mr. Thornton has no claim on you, legal or otherwise. He turned stern eyes on Jed. Furthermore, any attempt to harass or contact Mrs. Hartley will be met with immediate arrest. Is that understood? Jed's face was ugly with rage. This ain't over, he said. Not by a long shot. Yes, Sheriff Watson said, stepping forward. It is. You'll leave town by sunset, Mr. Thornton, or spend the night in jail. Your choice. For a moment, violence trembled in the air. Then Jed spat on the floor and stormed out, his mother following more slowly. The crowd began to disperse, many looking ashamed. Mrs. Patterson paused near Clara. I owe you an apology, she said stiffly. I didn't know. I shouldn't have judged. Clara nodded, too drained to respond. Then strong arms were around her, and she was being held against Beau's solid chest. It's over, he murmured. You're free, truly free. Take me home, she whispered. Please, just take me home. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. The children, who'd stayed with the minister's assistant, ran out to greet them. Is everything all right? Samuel asked anxiously. Did that bad man go away? He's gone, Beau assured him. And he won't be back. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara stood on the porch looking at the stars. Beau joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. You were brave today, he said. Braver than any woman should have to be. I was terrified, Clara admitted. But I couldn't let him win. Not again. He won't. Never again. Beau pulled her close. You're a Hartley now. We protect our own. Clara leaned into his warmth. Your wife, Mary, she was lucky to have you. And now I'm lucky to have you. Beau said simply, different luck, different love, but just as real. They stood together under the vast Colorado sky. Two wounded people who'd found healing in each other. In the house, 3 children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that their new mama was there to stay. And somewhere in the distance, Jed Thornton rode away, his power broken, his hold on Clara finally and forever severed. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human drama, but in the small circle of light cast by the ranch house windows, a family had been forged. Not by blood alone, but by choice, by courage, and by the kind of love that grows strongest in the broken places. The weeks following the hearing passed in peaceful rhythm. Autumn had arrived in the valley, painting the aspens gold and bringing crisp mornings that required extra quilts on the beds. Clara had fully settled into her role as Mrs. Hartley, and the ranch thrived under the care of 2 parents working in harmony. It was a Sunday afternoon, after church and the big midday meal, when Clara stood before the small gathering in the churchyard. The ceremony was simple, just family, a few close friends, and Reverend White presiding. But to Clara, it was everything. Dearly beloved, the Reverend began, his voice carrying across the small group. We are gathered here to witness a reaffirmation of vows between Beau and Clara Hartley, and to celebrate the formal adoption of Samuel, Lucy, and Thomas by Clara as their legal mother. Clara's eyes misted as she looked at the 3 children standing between her and Beau. Samuel, trying to look grown up in his best shirt. Lucy in the yellow dress Clara had sewn for her, and little Thomas fidgeting with his collar but beaming with excitement. The first wedding had been rushed, born of necessity and protection. This one was chosen, deliberate, a declaration before God and community that they were truly family. Clara, Reverend White continued, do you take these children as your own, to love, protect, and guide as their mother, through good times and bad, in sickness and health, for as long as you all shall live? I do, Clara said firmly, her voice carrying all the love she'd been holding back for so long. With all my heart, I do. Children, do you accept Clara as your mother, to honor and obey, to turn to in times of trouble and times of joy? Yes, Thomas shouted, making everyone chuckle. We do, Samuel said more formally, but his smile was bright. Yes, Mama, Lucy whispered, already reaching for Clara's hand. And Beau, do you reaffirm your vows to Clara, to love, honor, and cherish her as your wife? Every day for the rest of my life, Beau said, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. Then, by the power vested in me, I declare you a family in the eyes of God and law. What the Lord has brought together, let no one tear asunder. The small crowd erupted in applause. Doc Wilson wiped his eyes. Tom Morrison clapped Bo on the back. Even Mrs. Patterson, who had become a tentative friend since the hearing, dabbed at her cheeks with a handkerchief. But Clara only had eyes for her family. Thomas launched himself at her legs. Lucy wrapped arms around her waist. Even Samuel, dignified Samuel, pressed close for a hug. "Mama Clara," Thomas said, looking up at her with shining eyes. "Now you're really ours forever, right? Forever and always." Clara promised, kneeling to gather all three children close. Nothing will ever change that. Bo's hand settled warm on her shoulder, and Clara looked up at him through tears of joy. This man who had saved her, who had stood against convention and gossip to make her his wife, who had given her the family she'd thought she'd never have, no regrets, he asked softly, echoing his question from months ago. "Only one," Clara said, rising with Thomas on her hip. "That Mary isn't here to see how well you've all done, how happy her children are. She knows," Lucy said with the certainty of childhood. "She told me in a dream. She said she sent you to us." Clara's throat tightened. "Did she now?" "Uh-huh. She said we needed a mama who knew about being sad but chose to be happy anyway. That's you, isn't it? You were sad before, but now you're happy." "Yes, sweetheart." Clara managed. "Now I'm happier than I ever dreamed possible." The reception was held at the ranch. Nothing fancy. Just cake Clara had baked herself and cider from their own apples. Neighbors who had once whispered now offered genuine congratulations. The children ran and played with their friends, their laughter carrying on the autumn wind. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains purple and gold, Clara found herself alone on the porch for a moment. She touched the simple gold band on her finger, still marveling at how much had changed in a single year. "Wool gathering?" Bo asked, joining her. "Remembering?" Clara said. "That first day, when you found me by the grain warehouse? I was so lost, so certain my life was over. And you—" She turned to face him. "You offered me a chance, just a job. You said, just cooking and cleaning. Best hired help I ever found," Bo said with a grin. "Even if I did end up having to marry her to keep her." Clara laughed, swatting his arm. "Bo Hartley!" "It's true, though," he said, growing serious. "You saved us. Clara, all of us. This ranch was dying right along with us after Mary passed. You brought us back to life. We saved each other." Clara corrected. "That's what families do." From inside came the sound of the children arguing over the last piece of cake. Normal, everyday chaos that Clara wouldn't trade for anything. "I should go sort that out," she said. "In a minute." Bo pulled her close, and they stood together watching the stars appear one by one. "I love you, Clara Hartley. My wife, mother of my children, love of my second chance. And I love you," Clara whispered. "My husband, my protector, my home." Later that night, after the guests had gone and the children were tucked in bed, Clara made her rounds as she always did. Samuel, growing so fast, one arm flung over his head in sleep. Lucy, curled up with the rag doll Clara had made her, breathing easy and clear. Little Thomas, who'd insisted on sleeping with the wooden horse Bo had carved for him. Each child kissed, each blanket adjusted, each silent prayer of gratitude offered. In their bedroom, still a wonder, Bo was already in bed, watching her with the soft look he got sometimes. "Happy?" he asked as she joined him. "Beyond words," Clara said, settling into his arms. "Though I sometimes wonder—" "What?" "If I'll wake up. If this is all a dream and I'll find myself back in that cold room in Denver. Or worse, still with—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't—" "Hey." Bo tilted her chin up. "This is real. We're real. And I'll spend every day proving it to you if I need to." "You already do," Clara assured him. "Every time you come home for lunch just to see how I'm doing. Every time you include me in decisions about the ranch. Every time you look at me like I'm something precious. You are." Bo said simply, "You're everything." They lay together in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, an owl hooting, cattle lowing in the distance, the old house settling around them. "I've been thinking," Bo said eventually, "about expanding, maybe getting some sheep to go with the cattle. The children are old enough to help more, and with two of us working, I'd like that," Clara said, "building something together, making this place even better for the children." "Our children," Bo corrected, and Clara smiled against his chest. "Our children," she agreed. "Our family, our life." As sleep claimed them, Clara's last thought was a prayer of thanksgiving, for second chances, for love that healed old wounds, for 3 children who called her mama and meant it, for a man who'd seen past her broken pieces to the woman she could become. The moon rose full over the Double H Ranch, blessing the house where love had triumphed over pain, where a makeshift family had become real, where Clara Mae Thompson had finally become who she was meant to be, Clara Hartley, wife, mother, and living proof that sometimes the best families are the ones you choose. In the morning there would be chores and challenges, the daily work of ranch life. But there would also be Lucy's laughter, Thomas's hugs, Samuel's quiet smiles. There would be Bo's steady presence, his hand in hers as they faced whatever came. There would be home, and for a woman who'd once had nothing but the clothes on her back and bruises on her soul, home was everything. The stars wheeled overhead, keeping their ancient watch, and in the house below, a family slept peacefully, bound not by blood alone, but by choice, by courage, and by love, the strongest bonds of all. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this tale from the Wild West, don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Clara and Bo's journey. What touched your heart the most? Let me know in the comments.